Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, we have regrets from Councillor Robinson. And Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. I wonder if two members of Council could convenience us with a motion and a second to resolve in a committee of the whole. Councillor Lapworth and Councillor Grant, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. There are no consent items, confidential or public, and we have no public hearing items tonight, but we do have a pretty full slate of discussion items. The first item is the recommendation report on the CAPREIT Limited Partnership application for 1360 White Oaks Boulevard, known to some of us as the fitness application. And if you give your attention to staff, the application and how we got here tonight will be summarized for the public. Thank you, Tricia.
The purpose of this report is to present staff's recommendation on the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications submitted by CAPREIT Limited Partnership. As noted by my report, staff are recommending denial of the applications. The proposed site-specific official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment requests that the inclusion of a commercial use within the portion of the property it requests the inclusion of this use within the portion of the property designated high-density residential. The applicant is also requesting a site-specific zoning bylaw that would permit and regulate the proposed commercial use. When staff were first approached about the proposal, staff took into account the policies of the Livable Oakville Plan and the residential high-density zone of the subject site and provided preliminary feedback to the applicants regarding the proposal. The applicants were aware of staff's concerns regarding the appropriateness of a potential official plan and zoning amendment application, and instead they applied for a minor variance to permit the commercial use through the Committee of Adjustment. Staff recommended refusal of a change of use by way of variance as it was not the proper process to achieve a land use change, and the committee supported that recommendation and denied the proposal in May of last year. The effect of these applications, should they be approved, would be to permit an 838 square meter commercial fitness center within the residential building located at 1360 White Oaks Boulevard. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw to permit a commercial fitness center on the subject lands are not appropriate. The use would undermine the planned function of the high-density residential land use designation, creating adverse impacts to the established residential neighborhood, which the Livable Oakville Plan seeks to protect. The applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the change in land use is appropriate for this location. A public information meeting was held on November 22nd, 2016, in which 10 residents of the area raised concerns about the proposed commercial nature of the use, parking issues that would be created, and noise concerns. Staff have received a number of written submissions objecting to the application. Additional concerns of the public included that a commercial use could set a precedent in the neighborhood of allowing a level of intensity and activity in their residential area, the ability to regulate the hours of operation for a fitness facility, the intensity of the use, should the question about whether if the fitness center vacated the space, what would be allowed next, and impacts to the existing residents of 1360 White Oaks Boulevard, as well as adjacent neighbors with regards to traffic, parking, safety, garbage, and noise. A public meeting was held on February 13th, 2017. No further verbal comments were provided at this meeting. However, correspondence was received for submission to the members of the Planning and Development Council prior to February 13th, and these are included in Appendix A of this report. The subject lands are located at 1360 White Oaks Boulevard and 1289 Marlborough Court. The subject site is approximately 3.2 hectares in size and is bounded by Marlborough Court to the south, Trafalgar Road to the west, White Oaks Boulevard to the east, and detached dwellings abut the site to the north. To the east is a 21-story residential apartment building, and there's a six-story residential apartment buildings to the south. Sheridan campus is located on the west side of Trafalgar Road. The site contains two 18-story rental apartment buildings and a commercial plaza. The existing site includes 266 residential apartment units within the two towers, as well as the commercial component located at 1289 Marlborough, with 14 commercial tenants. The majority of the uses front onto Trafalgar Road, 3 units front onto Marlborough Court, and 2 units face the internal courtyard. There is also a Montessori school located at the base of 1360 White Oaks Boulevard. White Oaks Boulevard is considered a residential street that serves multiple forms of standalone residential buildings. The apartment building is connected to the commercial portion of the building that fronts onto Trafalgar Road by pedestrian walkways. The commercial building, noise walls at the rear of the drive-through and restaurant uses, as well as landscaping, divide the properties into 2 distinctly different sites. The Livable Oakville Plan was approved by Council in 2009, and it sets out the policies of where intensification would be appropriate and how growth should be managed through 2031. The subject lands are dual designated, neighborhood commercial and high-density residential in the Livable Oakville Plan. The portion of the lands fronting onto Trafalgar Road are designated neighborhood commercial, and the balance of the lands are designated high-density residential. The high-density residential land use designation does not contemplate commercial uses. In tonight's staff report dated April 24th, 2017, I have highlighted the relevant policies which speak to preserving, enhancing, and protecting the distinct character of established neighborhoods, directing the majority of growth to identified locations where high-density, transit, and pedestrian-oriented development can be accommodated, defines development as a change in land use, defines intensification as development that is at a higher density than currently exists, and includes intensification within neighborhoods may occur on underutilized lands within the existing density provisions, thereby requiring the use to be residential in nature and not in permitting additional uses. Oops, sorry. The planning justification report submitted in support of the subject applications takes the position that the reuse will foster increased social interaction and public safety and security, that it will bring investment into the building and more pedestrian traffic through the open space located at the center of the subject lands. The applicant proposes that the fitness center is a compatible mix of residential and employment uses within the neighborhood. The applicant has not demonstrated how permitting a significantly intense use, such as a fitness center, that has the potential to be open for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and invites the public to enter what has predominantly been private space for the existing residents, can be considered appropriate or to increase public safety. Fitness centers are known to be intense uses. Permitting an intense use within an established neighborhood will encourage other commercial business owners to seek out similar vacant spaces. The Trafalgar Road Corridor Planning Study is considered a special policy area with policies for lands within the designated corridor area. The entirety of the subject site is including the high-density residential lands, is identified as outside the Trafalgar Road special policy area boundary. The entire site is included the high-density in the corridor study, but the high-density lands were left outside of the policy structure. The intent of the special area policies is to maintain the commercial uses along Trafalgar Road and recognizes the residential nature of the apartment buildings. The policies speaking to intensification for residential uses do not contemplate commercial uses within the high-density residential designation. The intent was to preserve the commercial and mixed-use sites, promote the mixed use in terms of long-term redevelopment options, as well as protecting against the infiltration of non-residential uses within established neighborhoods. There's currently split zoning, which applies to the subject lands. The westerly portion along Trafalgar is zoned C1 with a special provision 86, and the easterly portion is zoned residential high with the same special provision. The following 3 slides identify the travel route from the commercial parking lot to the entrance of the proposed fitness center. So you're looking into the courtyard right now from the commercial parking lot. So you would travel through this walkway into the courtyard, through the courtyard, across the courtyard, and I've identified with this arrow the path to the fitness center. To the left would be over towards the back of Monahan's. On the left-hand side of this slide is a picture of the proposed space. It's vacant right now and has undergone some renovations to remove the pool area. On the right-hand side is looking back towards where you would have come from, the parking area, and that goes back, so you can see the noise wall where Burger King and Monahan's are, and then that's where you would go back towards the courtyard to access the parking at the commercial area. Staff have 3 main areas of concern with the proposal to change the use from a strictly residential space to a commercial space that will be open to the public. First off, the nature of the planned function of the residential use in the predominantly private space that currently exists. The space was not intended for a commercial business, nor is the site well designed to have a fitness center operate and be easily accessible. Impacts from advertising, signage, and lighting are also impacts onto the residential area that are associated with the commercial business. Number 2, the intensity of the use and the significant impacts and invasion of the private space, as well as to the established residential neighborhood, such as the hours of operation throughout the week and weekends, infiltration of parking into the residential lots off of White Oaks Boulevard, that will create a higher demand for parking in these areas and that were not intended to have public users, as well as on-street parking demand. The third, finally, the uncontrollable factors that a fitness center could invite into the area include increased public safety concerns that would need to be addressed through lighting and further thoughtful design of the site, as well as issues associated with noise and garbage. These impacts could also affect the enjoyment of the residents' private dwelling space. In addition, there is a significant concern over what will happen to the space should the fitness center vacate. The stage will have been set at this point for an intense use to be permitted in the subject building, and it can be anticipated that there will be increased pressure to expand the permissions and regulations to permit other uses in the future. In conclusion, staff is not satisfied that the application conforms to the overall policy direction, nor has the applicant sufficiently demonstrated that the change of land use is appropriate. The following rationale is provided in support of staff's recommendation. A commercial use is not contemplated within the residential high-density land use designation in livable Oakville, and it is not permitted within the residential high zone. It was not contemplated within the Trafalgar Road Corridor Planning Study, as only the Trafalgar Road frontage of the site with the commercial uses was intended for redevelopment, intensification, and change. The intensity of the commercial use and negative impacts do not enhance or protect the established neighborhood character of the existing residents. The property functions as 2 different sites and are separated physically by commercial uses, noise walls, and landscaping. The residential space was not designed to have an intense commercial use operate out of the ground floor. The commercial portion of the property along the Trafalgar Road Corridor serves the area well and is the more appropriate location for a commercial use. And a denial of this application will ensure that a precedent is not set for future applications of this nature to apply for similar permissions throughout residential areas. Denying the subject application will also ensure that should the proposed fitness center vacate the premises, that other commercial uses will not apply to modify the site-specific regulations and occupy the existing space in the future. And finally, the proposal is not appropriate and does not represent good planning. In conclusion, staff put forward the following recommendation as shown for council's consideration, that the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Capri Limited Partnership be denied. That notice of council's decision reflect that the refusal of the application was consistent with comments received from the public. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trish. Are there members of the public tonight here with information for council on this file? I don't see anyone. Councillor Adams.
If there are no members of the public wishing to provide any information, I would be happy to move the staff recommendation to deny the application. I thank our staff for having worked so diligently with members of the public on the file. It's been a long period of time, and I do appreciate the way in which they've reviewed each of the issues that were brought forward.
Sir, you have information for us.
Yes, thank you. I was put off by being a member of the public, although I am here as a consultant for this application. I'd like one final input, if you would permit me, sir.
Makes you a member of the public.
Thank you. My name is Nicholas Stell, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank Councillor Adam and Tricia as well, and all the planning staff for their support and correspondence on this application. I'd like to just end, before we receive your kind judgment, with a few notes. I think from my perspective as a private consultant, it's always exciting to stand behind an application that you think merits good planning and have sound engineering support that. We, of course, started with the genesis of that when evaluating what would be a good site or a candidate for a women's-only gym. Not only will that provide a safe haven for campuses that are directly in contact with this site, but we also thought that given the context of the dual designation, that there would be merit for having a bleeding of commercial uses already existing and with the ones that were accessed here today. And I want to just point out three things: precedent, speculation of precedent, origin of design versus under utility, and what we're missing out on with a refusal of the application. I think given the fact that this is a site-specific amendment, that precedent is going to be quite limited in terms of generating any or galvanizing any future applications for this site. It is to be solely accessed and used through the commercial aspect, but we only see the residential side as a reason for denying it. And of course, as a right by definition, that should be so, but without taking into context the hair's breadth line of designation, it's important to understand that this has good merit for being considered a commercial use, accessed solely through a commercial portion of the lot. The origin of this site, in our opinion, is not necessarily the great grounds to suggest that it should not be developed. In fact, it is the obsolescence of several original designs that merit development for things that were designed in general to begin with, that then permitted or then created under utility, which is why applications come forward for sites that had a good idea in its vision, but through various growth plans and the provincial vision invites development to help expand uses that are not being currently used. And that's what this property significantly is. What we're missing out on without approving this application is measures of control or established regulations by which a site can be facelifted with good sound landscaping, with better design for noise and garbage that were outlined as existing conditions. And we have a 20-year lease with a reputable women's-only gym that we would seek to put in place and to would further regulate and control any other noxious speculative developers who may come in. That's all I'd like to say, and I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions for the gentleman? Thank you, sir, for your information. Are there other questions by members? The staff recommendation is duly moved and on the floor. Shall I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The staff recommendation carries. Thank you, Trish.
Thank you.
That brings us now to the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy Phase 2 report from the Planning Services Department. And Council, we've absorbed a lot here, I would just point out. And if you give your attention to our staff, we will attempt to summarize this for the public. Ms. Shepherd, we're all ears.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council, and thank you for taking the time to wade through all of the material that's before you tonight. I do understand it's a pretty weighty package. We've had to look at it a few times here internally, and we hope that the reading experience was enjoyable for you. This is not the first time I've been before council to discuss cultural heritage landscapes with you, but I did want to take a moment to just give you a little bit of a refresher, especially for the benefit of the audience and the people who may be watching on town TV tonight, to go over what cultural heritage landscapes are and what the town has been doing about them. We're also going to take a slightly tag team approach to this presentation, so I'm going to start off by giving you this kind of background context, and then I'll turn the podium over to our principal consultant for Phase 2, Marcus Letourneau, and then once Marcus has shared some information with you, I'll return to the podium to provide some kind of wrapping up and next steps. So cultural heritage landscapes are defined in the 2014 provincial policy statement. And I think it's important enough that I'm actually going to read you the definition. So a cultural heritage landscape is a defined geographical area that may have been modified by human activity and is identified as having cultural heritage value or interest by a community, including an Aboriginal community. The area may involve features such as structures, spaces, archaeological sites, or natural elements that are valued together for their interrelationship, meaning, or association. And so we have lots of different types of cultural heritage landscapes out there. We have a number of cultural heritage landscapes in our 4 heritage conservation districts already in Oakville. Cultural heritage landscapes can also include gardens, battlefield sites, other neighborhoods, cemeteries, parks, trailways, so many different things. And they're rather complicated to understand, and so that's why we're taking the time to go through all of this information with you this evening. So, way back in 2013, staff began work on a cultural heritage landscape strategy for the town. The document was brought forward to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee in December of 2013, and that was unanimously endorsed by the Heritage Committee, and then I believe unanimously adopted by Council in January of 2014. The Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy gave a lot more information about what cultural heritage landscapes are, and it also provided a framework of policies for the town to identify and protect cultural heritage landscapes in the future. There were a couple of recommendations coming out of that strategy. One was an inventory of cultural heritage landscapes, but also it recommended that we create a specific terms of reference for heritage impact assessments for cultural heritage landscapes, and we accomplished actually both of those things. In order to implement the strategy, we actually took a 3-phase approach. So phase 1, you saw last year, that was the inventory. Phase 2 is where we are tonight. It's research and assessment, at least for some of the properties. And then phase 3 is the implementation of protection measures. So the inventory that was completed in 2016 included 63 properties across all of Oakville with a very wide variety of types of properties, from rural properties, urban properties, streetscapes, parks, harbors. So many different types of physical features and structures were looked at. The inventory sheets were not meant to be a thorough or complete research assessment report. They included very basic documentation and the identification of physical features as best as we could tell, as we didn't have access to all of the properties. And then we asked the consultants for that project to also assess each one of those 63 properties on a priority level of risk for change, and also based on the significance of the potential heritage resources on the site. And so out of that inventory, we arrived at 8 high priority properties, 16 medium priority properties, 27 low priority properties, and then 12 properties that had no further action recommended. And that didn't mean that they weren't cultural heritage landscapes. Some of them certainly were not, but others we recognized that the protection measures that we had in place were already sufficient. And so at that time, Council gave us the direction to move ahead into phase 2 for the high priority properties. So the high priority properties were properties that were considered vulnerable to change. And by that we mean development pressures, natural forces such as erosion, or storm damage, for example, or even neglect. These properties also were determined to have insufficient protection already, and they showed a high level of potential for cultural heritage value or interest. And so the properties that we're looking, that were included in the high priority property included 6 privately owned properties and 2 town-owned properties. So we have the Bowbeer Farmstead on Burnhamthorpe Road East, the Raydor Estate Glen Abbey on Dorval Drive, a property we originally called the McMichael Farm, which is now being renamed the Ravaz Farm on Dundas Street West, the Hilton Farm on North Service Road, the Bigger Farm on 6th Line, a remnant farmstead, which we've now called the Van Sickle Farm on Tremaine Road, and then the Bronte Harbor and the Bronte Bluffs. And this is a map showing the high priority properties. So you can see that they're very scattered around the town. From the rural properties in the north of Oakville, several properties around the center of town, and then towards the southern end, there we have the Bronte Bluffs and the Bronte Harbor. And I've noted already that there certainly are a wide variety of properties, even that we're looking at in phase 2. So for phase 2, getting into some of the details, we wanted to retain a multidisciplinary team that included landscape architects, people that were capable of very in-depth historic research, architectural history, and natural heritage. And we retained Letourneau Heritage Consulting. And again, I'll be turning this over to Marcus shortly, who will tell you a little bit more about his team. And the requirements for phase 2 of the implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy were to research each property, assess the condition of the property, including the built-in natural features, evaluate each property as a cultural heritage landscape against the appropriate criteria, if needed, to draft a summary of the cultural heritage value and list of features which may warrant conservation. They were to assist town staff in engaging with the public, including property owners and other stakeholders, and then create the draft cultural heritage landscape assessment reports for each property. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Marcus, and he's going to take you through the methodology of phase 2 and give you a brief overview of the 6 properties that were included in your agenda tonight.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and members of the public here today. We're very pleased to be here today to talk about our work on the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy Implementation Phase 2. As Sue mentioned, my name is Marcus Letourneau, and I'm the principal of Letourneau Heritage Consulting. We wanted to point out, though, right off the bat, that this was not a project done by one person. And part of our approach was to actually assemble a multidisciplinary team, in part because we felt it was really important to look at each of the properties from multiple perspectives and understanding of cultural heritage issues. And while specific team members or firms did lead parts of the project based on their professional expertise, as a team, and the team as a whole, was involved in the development of the project methodology, the discussion of the each property's historic landscape layers, and was involved in the discussion of the property's potential cultural heritage value and key features. And one of the things that we did is, as we were finalizing the report, we shared the report with team members to provide, so that they could provide comments, so that this was not just coming from a single person. And particularly for Glen Abbey, we assembled a separate team for 133 Dorval Drive because of its specialized nature as a golf course. And on the screens, you'll see the team members for the overall project, as well as some of the team members for the 1333 Dorval team. There is overlap between the two teams. And in terms of our methodology, one of the approaches that we took was we drew upon both heritage planning and current geographical research on cultural landscapes and how we approach cultural landscapes, how we understand cultural landscapes, and how we research them. It was important to note, though, no property access was granted during the first or second phase of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy for properties at 2031 North Service Road and 3451. For both of those properties, we were able to see a predominant section of the property from the public right-of-way, and the assessments of those property were done from the right-of-way. In terms of the historical research background, we integrated both primary and secondary research on each of the properties. Background research often included a review of records held at the Land Registry Office, local libraries, the Oakville Historical Society, various archival collections, the Trafalgar Township Historical Society, as well as both a review of current and historic aerial imagery and mapping. Several individuals identified as having knowledge of each of the property were contacted and interviewed as part of that background process. So in terms of each of the properties, the site-specific analysis included a property overview, looking at its existing conditions, topography, and a physical description. A look at the study area, a description of the physical context, adjacent properties, surrounding landscapes for surrounding landscape for each of the properties, in part to determine whether or not the cultural landscape we were looking at was confined to the property boundaries or was part of a much larger cultural landscape. We did a detailed site history for each of the properties. We undertook the site visits. And as part of this research, we identified key historic themes, key layers, and views associated with each property. I know that Ms. Shepard will be speaking about this, but local groups with an interest in Oakville's cultural heritage were also engaged, and a public open house was hosted by the town on March 7th. One of the things that we noted is that cultural landscapes are not an easy concept. They are complex, they are multifaceted, and their assessment really does require a multidisciplinary team, in part to understand that you can have notions that a single property may have layers, you may have overlapping pieces, you may have nested pieces. And as part of our approach, it was what are the best ways to understand these sort of properties as part of our research. And as Ms. Shepard noted, when we talked about the methodology, one of the things that we did as well is we turned to the provincial policy statement. And in part, what our research was doing was trying to determine the significance of the property. Not recommend a particular course of action, but whether or not the property is a significant cultural heritage landscape as defined by the provincial policy statement. And we felt it's important to note that significant in regard to cultural heritage and archaeology are resources that have been determined to have cultural heritage value or interest for the important contribution they make to the understanding of the history of a place, an event, or a people. Now, as stated within the PPS, criteria for determining the significance of the resources, including cultural heritage and archaeological resources, are recommended by the province. But municipal approaches that achieve or exceed the same objective may also be used. And the PPS also notes that while some significant resources may already be identified and inventoried by official sources, the significance of others can only be determined after evaluation. So with this in mind, you may be familiar with Ontario Heritage Act Regulation 906, which is used to determine local significance. For this project, we actually applied Regulation 906, 1006, which is the criteria for provincial significance, as well as the criteria for national historic sites. In the case of Dorval Drive, we also applied a fourth methodology, which I'll speak to in a few moments. So for those, just as a reminder, Ontario Heritage Act Regulation 906, a property is determined to have cultural heritage value of interest if it meets any one of these 9 sub-criteria. You only have to meet one for it to be considered significant. For 1006, the emphasis goes beyond the regional and starts looking at is the contribution beyond the local. Is it something significant to the province's history as a whole? And that's one of the big shifts that is from the local is this something that is significant across not just the municipality, not just a region, but provincially? And the National Historic Sites criteria, there are 3 different types of recognitions that can come from a National Historic Sites evaluation. A place may be designated as a National Historic Site, which is actually a physical place. A person or persons may be designated as having national historic significance, and an event may be designated of national historic significance if it represents a defining action, episodes, movement, or experience in Canadian history. As mentioned, we also applied, in the case of the Dorval Road property, and the evaluation criteria from the European Institute of Golf Course Architects for potential cultural heritage value. And in part to do this, because there are not many evaluative frameworks for cultural heritage landscapes, and particularly golf courses, we tried to find one of the preeminent evaluative methods used internationally, and this is the one that we used. EIGC, for those who are not familiar with it, which is the European Institute of Golf Course Architects, was commissioned by English Heritage to advise on the historic interest of golf course designs to inform the development of its new position statement and guidance on golf course development in historic parks, gardens, and wider landscapes. EIGCA prepared a report in 2007, Golf Courses as Design Landscapes of Historic Interest. This evaluative method was applied to this property as an example of an accepted international industry standard for evaluating cultural landscapes of this type. And in particular, this evaluation was completed by Ken Moody, who is the past president of IEGCA, with support from the project team. So in terms of the individual properties, the summary for each of the properties, in the professional, for 1333 Dorval Drive, it is the professional opinion of the project team that the property at 1333 Dorval Drive is a significant cultural heritage landscape as defined under the 2014 provincial policy statement. It meets many of the criteria under Ontario Regulation 906 for determining cultural heritage value or interest under the Ontario Heritage Act. It meets several of the criteria of Ontario Regulation 1006. It meets the National Historic criteria for its direct associations with a person and event of national historic significance, and it meets 5 of the 7 EIGCA criteria. In terms of 1086 Burnham Thorpe Road, it is the professional opinion of the project team that the property at 1086 Burnham Thorpe Road is a significant cultural heritage landscape, and it meets the criteria of Ontario Regulation 906. In the case of 1086 Burnham Thorpe Road, it was also evaluated against 1006 and the National Historic Sites criteria, but in the professional opinion of the team did not meet any of those criteria. For 3367 Dundas Street West, in looking at this property, it was the professional opinion of the project team that the property was not a significant cultural heritage landscape as defined within the 2014 PPS. However, the team did indicate that in its professional opinion, it is a significant built heritage resource. It does meet the Ontario Regulation 906 criteria for the building that is on site, but in this case, the broader context of the property has been lost. In 2031 North Service Road, in this case, it was the professional opinion of the project team that the property is a significant cultural heritage landscape. It meets the criteria of Ontario Regulation 906. However, again, it does not meet Regulation 1006 or the National Historic Sites criteria. 42436 Line. In this case, it was the professional opinion of the project team that the property is a significant cultural heritage landscape, and it meets the criteria of Ontario Regulation 906. As with some of the other properties, it was also evaluated using Regulation 1006 and the National Historic Sites criteria, but did not meet any of those criteria. (3541) Tremaine Road. In this case, it was the professional opinion of the project team that the property was not a significant cultural heritage landscape. In particular, due to the loss of the interrelationships between the features of the property and the broader context, the changes that have occurred in around this property, and when we put it in terms of a comparative analysis to the other properties that are already on the inventory and proposed to be examined, it was our opinion that this was not a good representative example. However, it does meet the criteria of Ontario Regulation 906 as a significant built heritage resource, and it's the professional opinion of the team that the property is better understood as a collection of significant built heritage resources. And at this point, I will now turn it back to Ms. Shafford.
Thank you, Marcus, for that overview of the properties that we're looking at tonight. As Marcus indicated earlier, I'm just going to briefly touch on some of the public engagement that we've undertaken during phase 2 of this implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, because we have undertaken quite a bit of engagement and consultation. As Marcus noted, during the research phase, we contacted stakeholders and local groups, including the property owners, local historical societies, the library, the Conservation Authority, as well as reaching out to First Nations that may have an interest in these areas to receive any information and feedback that they had to provide us with. We held the public open house on March 7th, which was well attended, I believe, by over 50 people. As well, we offered individual meetings one-on-one with property owners, town staff, and the consultants. And we did have property meetings with the following properties: 2031 North Service Road West, 3451 Tremaine Road, 1333 Dorval Drive, and 3367 Dundas Street West. In addition, the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee meeting was another opportunity for people to share additional information with us. I'd just like to note that the remaining 2 properties that are part of the study were certainly offered the opportunity to meet with staff. We heard back from the property owner at 1086 Burnham Thorpe Road East that she found the report very interesting. She did not request a meeting with us. And the property owner for the 6 Line property indicated that they were willing to see the proceedings through and would like to arrange a meeting with staff at a later date, and we're currently waiting for them to follow up with us, having reached out several times to make those arrangements. Regarding other engagement, there is a submission before you this evening from Club Link, and I did want to just provide a little bit of additional information regarding that property. Following the individual meeting that we did have with Club Link and their representatives, there was an exchange of further information between town staff and Club Link. The ERA report that is mentioned in Club Link's letter was actually submitted to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee meeting on April 25th. I do know that some of the committee members were able to read that report in advance of the meeting, but they did receive hard copies at that meeting, and we will ask at the next Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee meeting for their minutes to accurately reflect that information. As well, we did invite Club Link to meet with town staff prior to the distribution of the staff report tonight, but unfortunately that meeting did not take place. So, a little bit more information about the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee meeting. I know some people in the audience and also some members of council were there for some or the whole meeting. The draft Cultural Heritage Landscape Assessment reports were presented to the committee. The committee heard a presentation from staff giving a similar kind of overview, but a much more detailed review of each one of the assessment reports so that the Heritage Committee could wade into the nitty-gritty if they wanted to. We also heard from stakeholders, and there were several delegates made. The Heritage Committee discussed each one of the reports individually. For some of the reports, there were minor changes suggested, and then the Heritage Committee actually moved to endorse each one of those reports as well. For your information, we have included a summary of changes that were made between the draft report and the final version that you've seen today on the front page of each one of those appendices. The changes, I would say, were rather minimal. And so now we have the final assessment reports before you for review today. So, next steps. What are we doing next? Today, we're obviously here to try to complete phase 2 for the privately owned high priority properties. And so you're here to listen to our recommendations, and we're here to discuss those assessment reports with you and hear from members of the public. We expect the completion of phase 2 for the town-owned high priority properties to be later this summer, possibly into the fall. The process for that will be similar. Heritage Oakville will review the draft reports for Bronte Harbour and Bronte Bluffs, and then we will bring them forward to council with whatever changes are required from that meeting. But we haven't had the opportunity to accurately review the reports for the town-owned properties because we made time commitments to the privately owned properties in phase 2. And so We wanted to maintain the timeline commitments that we had made, and so we decided to push back the town-owned properties. But I can assure you that they use the same methodology that Marcus has described in the same report format, but of course they will contain completely unique and very interesting information for you to consider at a later date. In order to fully complete Phase 2 for the properties that were included in that original inventory of 63 properties, our medium and low priority properties, we're planning on trying to put forward a strategy on how to address those in the work plan that we'll be bringing forward to Council early in 2018. And so more information will be forthcoming at that time, but we did want to take the moment to assure Council that we haven't forgotten them, and that a lot of those properties we do believe to be significant cultural heritage landscapes as well. They just weren't considered to be at high as a risk as the properties that we're dealing with tonight. And so, I have taken much time to read each one of the cultural heritage landscape assessment reports that are included for you in the appendices to tonight's agenda. And it's staff's conclusion that the 4 properties at these following addresses are significant cultural heritage landscapes: 1333 Dorval Drive, 1086 Burnhamthorpe Road East, 2031 North Service Road West, 42436 line, and that the 2 properties at the following addresses are not significant cultural heritage landscapes, although it has been noted that they may contain other heritage resources, and that's 3367 Dundas Street West and 3451 Tremaine Road. We should note as well that while these 4 properties have been identified in these reports as significant cultural heritage landscape, the tools for protection of these properties will be developed through Phase 3 of the implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy. And this is because there are a number of tools that are available to the town to protect and conserve cultural heritage landscapes, and Phase 3 really needs to look hard at those to determine which tools are best utilized on each property according to their unique circumstances. Some of these tools will require processes that are determined by legislation, and the town will need to follow those processes as appropriate. So, in summary, staff recommends that Phase 3 commence for 4 of the properties that we've presented to you tonight, those that have been identified as significant cultural heritage landscapes: 1333 Dorval Drive, 1086 Burnhamthorpe Road East, 2031 North Service Road West, 42436 line. We've also noted here that the property at Dorval Drive, as directed by Council in 2016, has priority for the completion of Phase 3. We're also recommending tonight that Council provide us with additional funds to carry out Phase 3 for these high priority properties that are identified as significant cultural heritage landscapes. And we anticipate that while it will be a staff-led project, that several of the consultants that were retained for Phase 2 may also be retained to provide us with assistance in Phase 3 as independent experts. And so Phase 3 will, as I mentioned, explore the appropriate tools that we're going to use to ensure the protection of the heritage attributes that we've identified in Phase 2. And so the recommendation before you, I would say, is as long as the staff report and appendices as well. It's only fitting. We have dealt with each one of the properties individually in the recommendation. Our first recommendation is to receive the reports that are attached in the appendices. The second is to recognize the property at 1333 Dorval Drive as a significant cultural heritage landscape and move it into Phase 3 with priority, as I've noted. Recommendation 3, that the property at 1086 Burnhamthorpe Road East be recognized as a significant cultural heritage landscape and move into Phase 3. That the property at 2031 North Service Road West be recognized as a significant cultural heritage landscape and move into Phase 3. That the property at 42436 line be recognized as a significant cultural heritage landscape and move into Phase 3. And that no further action be taken as part of this strategy, the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, with respect to the high priority properties not identified as cultural heritage landscapes: 3367 Dundas Street West and 3451 Tremaine Road. We are then asking for additional funding to be added to the Heritage planning studies budget in order to complete Phase 3 work. And then also noting again that the medium and low priority properties from Phase 1 will be addressed in the annual Heritage Planning Work Plan in 2018. So that concludes my presentation this evening. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that council may have. I will also possibly rely on our consultant, Mr. Marcus Letourneau, and other town staff if I need to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shepard, for a very logical report that stepped us through this process in a very comprehensible way. We have quite a list of questioners, and I'm going to start with Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Thank you, and thank you to our consultant who did such a phenomenal amount of work. Having had a property within our ward that we were able to protect, or what shall I say, do credit to when it went through the process of development, and it was a heritage property. And it really gave me insight as to the cultural heritage landscape and the importance of that it's not just bricks and mortars. It's so much more that goes into not only the history of our community, but the country. The process for the Phase 3, will that come to Heritage Oakville and then through to council? I'm just thinking in terms of the public process and the opportunity to comment. Like once you've arrived at those tools that you think address the needs on each particular property, will a recommendation first come to Heritage Oakville and then on to council?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Duddick, yes, it definitely will, especially as some of the tools that are available for us to use may require, may include designation under the Heritage Act. And the Heritage Act specifically requires us to consult with our Municipal Heritage Committee. And so, yes, we do fully expect that there will be a follow-up staff report for the Phase 3 properties as they move through their various streams, noting that the protection tools that we implement for one may not be the same as the other, but we want to be as thorough as possible, and the Municipal Heritage Committee is a valuable resource for us to use.
And I appreciate the fact that you also made reference to some of the ones that weren't as high a priority, and that it wasn't due to their significance, but that you felt there was sufficient protection in place. So I appreciate you providing that. And it's interesting tonight when we're looking at the funding, which I think is money very well spent. We're also looking at the grants. It's very timely having the two items here on the evening while we're dealing with this. I just was blown away by the history, and I was talking to my colleague earlier. We were fortunate enough to be at the Upper Canada Country Club, Golf and Country Club, as a child, and we have different recollections of having spent some good times there. So it was like a trip down memory lane. At the appropriate time, I'd be very willing to move the item, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. Councillor Hutchins.
Thank you, Your Worship, but I was going to be happy to move the town's recommendations as well. But Councillor Kathy Duddick has already proposed that.
She is apparently got heritage rights on you. Perhaps we should designate her.
I don't think I'll touch that particularly.
I'm being braver than I should be, perhaps. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Shepard. It was for some late bedtime reading here. My question has to do with the Brawny Inner Harbor and the Brawny Bluffs. And I know because those are town controlled that they've they're not as a high priority, but pardon the pun, but sometimes the ground shifts right underneath our feet while we're developing these, and over the past week we've seen some pretty intense devastation happen in the Brawny Inner Marina and some effects on the bluffs. So I'm wondering, it was about the Brawny, the Metro Marina building was under about 8 inches of water when I was down there. So I'm wondering what we may be doing or how we might take a different look at what we're classifying a priority in terms of allowing us to develop the tools that we need to protect those places before perhaps another 3 or 4 years go by and something happens that we can't recover from.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor O'Meara, it certainly won't be that long. And there are other members of the Heritage Planning team, so I do expect that or hope that some of this work can be done concurrently. And one of the reasons why the Bronte Harbour and Bronte Bluffs reports haven't made it through the system yet is because we haven't had the time to have those individual one-on-one meetings with what we consider the property owner, so the other town staff who are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep, so our facility staff, our parks and open spaces staff, and we're also looking at the opportunities to line up this plan with the Bronte Harbour's master plan as well. And so we're very cognizant that that the work needs to be done. And the fact that it's not before you today does not reflect that it's not a high priority for us. It's just, we had made this time commitment. We were doing our very best to get all 8 done at once, but it would have been even more reading for everybody tonight had we included those reports. But I do commit to you that we will have them done as soon as possible because they are high priorities for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I guess I'm interested, if in fact this is approved tonight, I would like to know the timelines related to Phase 3, when it will start, and also when it will end, and with what degree of accuracy the dates would have.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Elgar. So for the property at 1333 Dorval Drive, should Council endorse a recommendation to make that a priority for the completion of the report, we anticipate that it will be coming forward back to Council by late summer, early fall for Council to consider. The Bronte Harbour and Bronte Bluffs reports will be working on ongoing throughout the summer. I anticipate they will be sometime probably after the Dorval Drive report. And then the remaining high priority properties will be back to Council as soon as we possibly can, hopefully before the end of the year.
So the Phase 3 would be completed by November, for sure, of 2017?
Phase 3 for the high priority properties, we
Right.
hope should be completed by the end of 2017.
Okay, I appreciate that. I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lischina?
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Shepherd, you indicated that 133 Dorval Drive is a high priority cultural heritage landscape. I'm wondering, are there other golf courses that have been heritage designated?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, there are several examples that I know of within the province of Ontario, specifically Roselawn Golf Course in the city of Windsor has been designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, and there's also a golf course in Mississauga that has a Part 4 designation bylaw as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lischina. Councillor Chisholm?
Your Worship, my question has already been answered through Councillor Elgar. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's the risk we take. Councillor Adams, that leaves you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to compliment staff on their work on the 1086 Burnhamthorpe Road location. Very interesting location. It's a fascinating set of photos that you were able to compile and put together. It's really an amazing place. In fact, as an aside, it's a location where I had an election photo taken a long time ago. So, but my real question is, what's the public consultation process going to be for Phase 3? How will people take part in it? What kind of input can they have?
Through you, Your Worship, that will be determined essentially by the tools that we'll be utilizing for each one of those properties. And so a number of the processes that we can use, official plan amendments, designation under the Heritage Act, they have consultation actually built right into the legislated process. We have to consult with our Heritage Committee. We have to provide notice to the owners of the properties. things like that, so that there is opportunity for public comment. Well, again, I can't really comment on too much about phase 3 because we haven't gone there yet. We'll be determining that public consultation strategy if council gives us the direction to move forward this evening.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. As that appears, Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, that question and answer leads me to a question regarding public consultation. Would we be doing it during the summer holidays? Like I'm thinking July and August? Or would we make a point of making sure it will be done when we're back to a normal session?
Through you, Your Worship, as I said, as we haven't been given the direction yet to do it, I'm a little bit hard-pressed to give you an answer on that one. We certainly are sensitive to people being away during the summer and trying to give them the opportunity to provide their input, but we are on some fairly tight timelines. I would say specifically for the Dorval Drive property. I don't know if our commissioner or director has any additional information to add.
Yeah, the only, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I would add is, as you know, this study was one of the studies that were directed to be done under the interim control bylaw, so there are some time limits to that. So we will take into consideration the ability to consult with the public through the summer months. Property owners, will certainly look to them to see if we can consult with them. So we'll try and wrap a public consultation program that best enables us to get in touch with people, either early in the year before the summer starts in the June timeframe, or at the very beginning of September at the latest. But we'll certainly take that into consideration when we develop that program.
I thank you for that, because we want to make sure there is public engagement. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That exhausting questions for now from Council. Madam Clerk, would you call the listed delegations?
The first listed delegation speaking to this item is Fraser Demoff.
Welcome, Mr. Demoff. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and Council. Before I begin, I do want to thank you for the various updates that you guys have provided on this file. It's obviously one that's very important to all of Oakville, especially the people here tonight. I don't think we've seen an issue as challenging as this since the gas plant and us not being a willing host on that a few years ago. But it just speaks to how important Glen Abbey Golf Course is to Oakville and the major part of Oakville's identity that Glen Abbey Golf Course holds. When you think of Oakville, you think of the green space, the creeks, the downtown, the Kerr business districts, and our town atmosphere, and central part of that is Glen Abbey Golf Course. And I was very pleased, and I think a lot of the members of the public here tonight were very pleased to read the staff report and the recommendation that Glen Abbey Golf Course is a cultural heritage property and that it deserves moving forward and looking at how we can possibly protect that for future generations. I want to give a bit of a background on part of the reason why I think Glen Abbey Golf Course is so important. When I was growing up, and certainly members of council will know this already, but when I was growing up, a country drive started at Third Line and Upper Middle, and then if you were going on Dundas, you were driving out in the boonies. And that area now forms one of the most prominent areas of Oakville and Glen Abbey, named after our beloved golf course, Glen Abbey Golf Course. So for many of us, we've seen time over time a slow loss of green space and trees to the single detached home. And it's partly because of this that Glen Abbey Golf Course has been so important, because for the longest time, Glen Abbey Golf Course has represented a pristine, untouchable piece of Oakville's identity that deserves being protected. And so when the question is raised of whether Glen Abbey Golf Course is considered a significant cultural heritage property, I think the unequivocal answer is that it is. And that and we at Save Glen Abbey Coalition strongly support the recommendations made by staff, and we are very encouraged by the report. One of the key aspects that I wanted to highlight on behalf of the group is the mention in the report to the visual linkage to the surrounding neighborhood. I think this is an important part that that shouldn't go unnoticed. I would even argue that Glen Abbey Golf Course has a visual linkage to the entire town, the entire province, and even the entire country, especially if you ask certain golfers. It's certainly a property that is a landmark for Oakville and the province. And again, I want to commend staff on the great work and LHC consultant, the great work that they did on that report. I think it covered a lot of the things that we've been seeing and a lot of the things that we've heard from the community at our various protests and speaking to community members. So I just again want to thank council and the mayor and staff on the report, and I look forward to seeing how the recommendations can be implemented as we go forward to phase 3. Thank you.
Other questions for the delegate? Mr. Demoff, thank you for your information. Madam Clerk.
Our next listed delegation is Wendy Bodnoff.
Welcome, Ms. Bodnoff. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, Your Worship, Council and staff. As you heard, my name is Wendy Bodnoff, and beautiful Oakville has been my home for over a quarter of a century. I speak tonight as a resident in support of the Save Glen Abbey Coalition. How ironic it is that an explosion of homes on our green space is threatening our Oakville home, and now arguably its single most distinctive and defining feature, Glen Abbey Golf Course. I believe iconic, historic, world-renowned Glen Abbey, home of the Canadian Open, Golf Canada, and Canadian Golf Hall of Fame, and layers of Canadian history, is more than Oakville's jewel, it's Canada's treasure. We in Oakville are simply its stewards. I hope you agree. Mayor Burton, Oakville Council, and town staff, I would like to congratulate you on last week's OMB decision allowing your interim control bylaw and extension to stand until 3 studies are completed on Glen Abbey Golf Course and the former Rador Estate located at 1333 Dorval Drive. I'm a little dismayed, though, that one of the studies is not environmental impact. 16 Mile Creek runs through Glen Abbey Golf Course. It is one of 3 main watersheds covering 357 square kilometers of the 1,059 in Conservation Halton's purview. It includes Niagara Escarpment in the northwest and waterways that drain into Lake Ontario at Oakville, impacting flood control, low flood augmentation, and recreation in Milton, Halton Hills, Oakville, and Mississauga. The unprecedented flooding we are currently experiencing, which Councillor O'Meara mentioned, and this weekend's 9 park and pier closures underscore the importance. How is this not a factor? I'm also surprised that Glen Abbey's distinction as an Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Golf Course for 13 years, since 2004, is not being considered. Only 5% of the over 2,300 golf courses in Canada hold this prestigious Audubon International Environmental Designation based on an audit and certification program covering 6 categories. The categories are environmental planning, chemical use reduction and safety, water conservation, water quality management, wildlife and habitat management, and outreach and education. That said, thank you so much for having the wisdom and foresight in 2014 to launch a three-phase cultural heritage landscape strategy to identify, protect, and preserve Oakville's history, heritage, culture, and irreplaceable natural and design green spaces. I hope your leadership in this area helps nurture seedling legislation to benefit the Oakville community and communities far beyond. I also commend the town of Oakville hired consultants, Laterno Heritage Consulting, in partnership with DTAH, Content Works, This Land Archaeology, and Creative Golf Design, for their excellent work on the Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report as part of Phase 2 of the town's strategy Cultural Heritage Assessment. I sincerely hope Council adopts the April 25th Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee endorsement of that report and the recommendation of both the consultant and staff to recognize Glen Abbey Golf Course as a significant cultural heritage landscape. Even if that does not happen, Oakville, Ontario, Canada has now a detailed historical account of 229 irreplaceable green acres, almost 93 hectares in the heart of our community. And perhaps Ontario communities have a framework and methodology they can use to evaluate their complex, as was described by the consultant, cultural heritage landscapes. The forced focus on Glen Abbey has also exposed issues we need to address, such as the ease with which developers can purchase vanishing green space, including golf courses, and bulldoze through provincially approved, community-centered, community-created official and growth plans, and the lack of protection of irreplaceable green space, our history and heritage. George Orwell said, "The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history." Perhaps that's a little dramatic, but to further the Oakville community's understanding of our history, I would like to request that the town consider creating a brochure from the Phase 2 historical research to be distributed to every household in Oakville, perhaps as part of Canada's 150th birthday celebration. The information unearthed in Phase 2 is invaluable. Here's a quick version. Glen Abbey Golf Course's history predates Confederation. In 1792, the land was located in Upper Canada within a land tract designated Mississauga Indian land. That's a quote, as proclaimed July 16, 1762. In 1795, the majority of the Mississauga land was acquired by the British from the Anishinaabe of Mississauga people, but Indigenous families continued to frequent the entrances of 16 and 12 Mile Creek seasonally. In 1827, land at the mouth of 16 Mile Creek was sold to William Chisholm, who founded Oakville that year. Thomas Smith, recognized on the Smith-Triller Viaduct over the valley, owned a lot and was listed as a lumber merchant in an 1851 census. In 1937, Andre Dorfman, a Canadian mining engineer and entrepreneur linked to the Canadian Gold Rush, purchased it. He landscaped, added a long tree-lined entrance, walled gardens, imported trees, built a home and stables, and called it Radar Estate. In 1953, he sold Radar to the Jesuits. In 1963, it became Upper Canada Golf Club. In 1974, Rod McIsaac, owner of Great Northern Capital, bought the property and made a deal with the Royal Canadian Golf Association, RCGA, to redevelop the course into a spectator-friendly venue for the Canadian Open. RCGA leased the Radar House for its headquarters and museum from 1975 to 83 when it purchased the club property. Golf legend Jack Nicklaus was contracted to design the Stadium Mount course, the second of its kind in North America, designed to improve sight lines to accommodate a growing spectator interest. It was his first solo design. He went on to design 200 more. The Canadian Open was first played at Glen Abbey in 1977, and this July will mark its 29th Canadian Open. Winners include legends Tiger Woods, Lee Trevino, and Arnold Palmer. In 2000, as most of us know, Tiger famously used a 6-iron from a fairway bunker 218 to shoot a ball 218 yards over a pond, the ball landing 18 feet from the 18th hole. He won the Canadian Open and Triple Crown with that shot. Perhaps you have tried to replicate it. Everyone does. In 1999, RCGA sold Glen Abbey to Club Link for $40 million. In closing, I would like to thank you, Mayor Burton, council, and staff of the town of Oakville for standing up to outside pressure and taking strategic, proactive, positive action. Tonight, hopefully, Glen Abbey Golf Course is recognized as a significant cultural heritage landscape and moves to phase 3 with priority implementation of protection measures. Winston Churchill once said, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." I encourage every one of us to follow in his footsteps. And NIMBYs, any that are in the room, redefined as I care enough to act regardless of where I live. Please spread the word and sign the Save Glen Abbey petition at change.org to help steward Oakville's jewel and Canada's treasure, Glen Abbey Golf Course, home of the Canadian Open. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bodnoff. Are there questions for the delegation? Thank you very much for bringing your information. Madam Clerk.
Next delegation speaking to this item is Dan Crothers.
Mr. Crothers, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak before Council tonight. I am a resident of Oakville, have been here for, well, I guess since 1987, and currently live in the property just right by the gates in the townhouses there, and I'm here to represent that group of owners. I've had the opportunity to read all of the reports, both by the consultant for the town and that presented by ClubLink, and to attend the various meetings and hear the representations. And I'm here to support the recommendations of the Heritage Committee to move forward, to move this to the next stage. I've personally been involved with Glen Abbey since 1979 when I first played the course, and I've played it every year since, both as a walk-on payer and as a member of ClubLink for 16 years playing out of the course. One of the things that struck me in all those years was the number of people that came from far and wide, from Canada, across the US, and even from Europe, that came here to play the course because of its history with Jack Nicklaus and with the Canadian Open. Just last week, for instance, I was on course. I met a German man who was traveling across North America and came here because of its history to play the course, and he was inspired. And that same day, I bumped into another German couple. I don't know why I bumped into all these Germans, but they were touring the site and looking at the various plaques that were there, and were awed by the course and were planning to go up and play it. In all those representations and meetings with people, they've been impressed with the quality of the course and the history of the course and the heritage. I think we all recognize that Glen Abbey has slipped a little bit in the stature of golf courses across North America and across Canada. Slid down the scale from being in the top 10 to below. But over that period of time, many new golf courses have been built with new technology and whatever. But Glen Abbey continues to have something that they don't have. It is something that it's accessible by the public. Some of those courses are private courses, very nice courses, but we don't have the opportunity to play them unless we happen to have a nice friend. The other thing is that it is designed for viewers, spectators, to be able to see the course, to see a Canadian Open, one of our long-standing Canadian traditions. Canadian Open is not guaranteed to be here in Oakville. I mean, the current operators may choose to bring it here, but it is a good thing. There aren't very many courses across Canada that can actually host the course. As I say, it's not just the players that have a say, it's also the security around the course, the viewers' ability to see the course, the handle, all of that stuff. Glen Abbey was designed to do that. Not all these other fine courses are designed to do that. It's been a feature of Oakville, and I think we need to keep it there. You know, if we lose the Glen Abbey site, the Open will not come back to Oakville. There are no other courses in the region that can handle it. And I think that's important if we want to keep this part of our heritage, Oakville, the Canadian Open, as part of what we treasure. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Carruthers, for your information. Are there questions? Thank you, Mr. Carruthers. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation speaking to this item is Tim Danter.
Welcome, Mr. Danter. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. My name is Tim Danter. I'm President of the Chartwell Maple Grove Residents Association, and this evening I'm representing not only our board, but the Joshua Creek Residents Association, as well as the Trafalgar Residents Association. And we would like to commend the town and the staff for being so diligent with the interim control bylaw for the Glen Abbey development application. We also like to acknowledge Save Glen Abbey for their hard work and efforts. And with that said, basically I'm up here representing the residents associations to convey that Glen Abbey is synonymous with Oakville, and we do support the efforts to protect our cultural landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation speaking to this item is Karen Brock.
Welcome, Ms. Brock. The Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening. My name is Karen Brock, and tonight I represent Oakville Green Conservation Association, a not-for-profit organization whose mandate is to preserve and enhance green spaces through advocacy, education, and action. We applaud Council for requesting the cultural heritage landscape studies on several Oakville properties in order to identify and underline the historic value of these homes and properties within our community. In particular, we support strongly that the Raydor Estate or the Glen Abbey Golf Course property at 1333 Dorval Drive be recognized as a significant cultural heritage landscape. And I'd like to add for your consideration that it be considered for its natural heritage features as well. So I'd be happy to speak with Ms. Shappert perhaps in the next phase of ways that we can look at that preservation. This property has fostered Oakville's identity and pride, has enhanced quality of life, and promotes economic development in Oakville. I'm going to borrow heavily from the Ontario Ministry of Culture, and I quote, "Our cultural heritage is a big part of what makes a community unique. Heritage enhances our sense of place." For example, what would Kingston be without its limestone buildings, or Petroglyphs Provincial Park without its petroglyphs? And now, what would Glen Abbey be without Glen Abbey Golf Course? Development pressures are intense. Communities grow and change. We're getting used to that. But we must identify and honor the past. The Ministry of Culture states, "Our cultural heritage is not just about the past. It is about the places, spaces, and stories that we value today that we want to build on for the future." The 535 acres of Glen Abbey Golf Course, so we're not talking a lot or 2 acres or 10 acres, we're talking 535 acres of the Glen Abbey Golf Course are a significantly large parcel of land within the heart of Oakville. Last week's record rainfalls and resulting flooding, which others have mentioned, served as a timely reminder of the importance of green infrastructure and of stormwater management, keystones to urban function. Due to climate change and more frequent extreme weather, all you had to do was listen to the CBC this morning, it's imperative that we reframe our municipal policies and turn a corner and start doing things differently. Green space is not dispensable, and its economic value is high. We're all daily witnesses to the results of climate change and environmental degradation. There's a scientific consensus that green spaces and their ecosystems provide immeasurable benefits, yet we continue in a downward spiral, gobbling up valuable green fields instead of intensifying underutilized areas. When it's gone, it's gone. I urge staff and council to examine closely the value of not only Raydor Estate itself, but the property in its entirety as a natural heritage landscape. The Ontario Heritage Act states heritage is more than buildings and artifacts. The province's wetlands, woodlands, grasslands, and geological land formations are natural heritage treasures that enrich our environment. I was at a council meeting recently, and there was talk of interior forest habitat, and I suspect that there's probably no interior forest habitat left here in Oakville with the exception of Glen Abbey Golf Course. It also says natural features can have cultural value. Communities have recognized trees, hedgerows, woodlots, and other features as natural monuments, much like our Bronte oak, that deserve recognition and protection as cultural heritage resources. The tablelands of Glen Abbey, complete with hundreds of mature trees, plus the floodplains of Oakville's largest creek, 16 Mile Creek, total 535 acres. That contribute vastly to the beauty and uniqueness of the Raydor Estate and Glen Abbey. They surely qualify as significant provincial natural heritage. And just as a follow Councillor Adams' trip down memory lane, I remember quite clearly in August of 1993, biking over to the New Smith Triller Viaduct with my children, and all of us, for the first time, looking down into the valley at Glen Abbey Golf Course, and it was a very memorable day, and hot. We urge the committee and council to approve the recommendation brought forward tonight to embark on Phase 3, which will place a high priority on the protection and celebration of Glen Abbey as a unique, integral part of Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions, Council? Thank you very much for bringing your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Our next listed delegation is Mark Flowers.
Welcome, Mr. Flowers. Council looks forward to your information, and I should tell you that we've received your letter and digested it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council, and good evening. My name is Mark Flowers. I'm a lawyer with Davies Howe, and I represent Club Link, the owner of Glen Abbey Golf Club at 1333 Dorval Drive. Just a point of clarification, or a couple. First of all, in response to the last speaker, the property is not over 500 acres in size. In fact, it's approximately 230 acres. Another point of clarification, and this is in response to a question from a member of council to Ms. Shepard about whether there are, in fact, other golf courses in Ontario designated under the Heritage Act as cultural heritage landscapes. And I think it was mentioned that there were several, but then two identified in particular, one in Windsor, which I understand is Roseland, and one in Mississauga, which is Lakeview. I think it's important to understand, and a very important distinction, Club Link, of course, owns the Glen Abbey property, so it's privately owned. The other two golf courses that were mentioned, in fact, our understanding is they are publicly owned. So that is an important distinction in terms of that fact. As Ms. Shepard noted, and Mr. Mayor, as you've just noted, we did file a letter with the town earlier today. I hope that all members of council have received and reviewed that. And I'll just hit some highlights. Essentially, we are requesting that council defer its consideration of the evaluation report and the staff recommendations pertaining to the Glen Abbey property until such time as Club Link has had a proper opportunity to provide meaningful input into in response to the evaluation report. As noted in our letter, town staff has still not fully responded to information requests that were made by Club Link, and that arose from a meeting that was held between the town and Club Link and its consultants on March the 30th. That's now more than 6 weeks ago, and still information is outstanding. In addition, Club Link continues to request that the town's heritage consultant meet with Club Link's consultant, ERA Architects, in order to discuss the evaluation report and specifically to assist both ERA and Club Link in understanding the analysis that has led to some of the findings in the report. Again, this is part of the information requests that have been made. There's some areas that have led in the report that have led to certain findings, and ERA and Club Link don't have a full understanding of how some of those findings were made, some of the criteria that was used, and so forth, and again are asking for that information to be provided, but also for a meeting to take place between the consultants to assist in that understanding. Now, as recently as last week, and I think Ms. Shepard was referring to this, Mr. Simeone did provide Club Link with some, but I stress not all of the information that has been requested by Club Link. At the same time, Mr. Simeone reiterated his refusal to allow the heritage consultants to meet. Frankly, it's unclear to us why staff is so reluctant to allow the town's independent heritage expert to meet with Club Link's expert ERA, particularly where Club Link believes that such a meeting would assist it in understanding the analysis that has led town staff now to recommend that the Glen Abbey property be recognized as a cultural heritage landscape and to proceed to Phase 3, the implementation phase. Further, Club Link received the draft evaluation report only days before the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting on April 25th, and at that time had not received any of the material from town staff in response to its earlier information requests. In addition, it does not appear that all members of the committee had reviewed ERA's Cultural Heritage Landscape Assessment Report, which was filed with the town in November, and as Ms. Shepard noted, I hand-delivered hard copies at that meeting, but certainly it had been available to the town in November. And that was, as I say, at the committee meeting last month. Thus, we don't believe that the Heritage Committee had full and accurate information before it when it made its recommendation to this council to in fact endorse the draft evaluation report. And for these reasons, we request the following from council. This is set out in our letter on page 4, but I'll just repeat the 4 requests right now. The first is that council defer its consideration of the evaluation report for the Glen Abbey property at this time. 2, that council direct staff to fully respond to Club Link's outstanding information requests. 3, that council direct staff to permit the town's heritage consultant to meet with Club Link's heritage consultant to discuss the entirety of the evaluation report, including its findings. And 4, that council direct staff to report back to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee and this council only after items 2 and 3 have been completed. And it's our position that taking these steps would be the appropriate manner in which to proceed in order to avoid Club Link being denied due and proper process. If, however, council is not prepared to accept Club Link's request and instead proceeds to adopt the staff recommendation to proceed to phase 3, we do offer the following comments for your consideration. And again, this is set out in our letter as well. Given the nature of Club Link's interest in any proposed implementation tools, and you've heard from your staff and from Mr. Letourneau that the tools can be quite diverse and varied. There's a number of tools that could be used. So as part of that, we would request on behalf of Club Link the opportunity to review and comment on proposed terms of reference that will guide the work of the town's heritage consultant through that phase 3 process. In addition, Club Link requests that during the consultant's work in phase 3, Club Link be given an opportunity to meaningfully be engaged. And by that I mean including the opportunity for meetings between Club Link's consultant and the town's heritage consultant as the project proceeds to completion, which, as we heard in response to a question from Councillor Elgar, could be as early as late summer, early fall. So with that, I thank Council for your time, and subject to any questions, those are our submissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flowers. Are there questions for the gentleman? Councillor Elgar.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Flowers. I appreciate what you have to say. I'm curious as to why your client calls Glen Abbey a world-famous property. Why would that, what do you think, why would he call it a world-famous property, or why would Club Link do that?
Councillor, could I ask you to reconsider whether that's a question?
Well, I just trying to figure out what is world-famous in your mind.
I'm probably, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure I'm in the best position to answer that. I'm not sure where that quote comes from, whether that's something on the website or in Club Link materials.
It's in the glenabbey.clublink.ca website.
Okay, I think that question would probably be better posed to Club Link directly. I'm not in a position to answer that.
Okay. Is Club Link here tonight that you could ask?
Representatives of Club Link are in attendance.
They're here? Would they have the answer, do you think?
I don't know that they'd be in a position to answer that right now.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I also noticed that it said the first ever solo designed by the legendary Jack Nicklaus. So it kind of they think it's important also. That's why I just wanted to point it out to you.
Sorry, important in what way? You mean from a heritage perspective?
Well, that's why I'm asking, why do they think it's world famous, and then why they mentioned the first solo golf course that Jack Nicklaus designed.
Yeah, I think those may be two different things, but in terms of the heritage, first of all, the property is already designated under the Heritage Act. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not, but in fact, this council has already designated the property, and specifically we've heard of the Rador Estate. So that building is already designated. So there's no dispute that there are heritage elements. As I say, there's already a designation applicable to the property. I think here the issue is that the town's consultant has made some sweeping statements about the property in terms of being a significant cultural heritage landscape and whether that applies to the entirety of the property or certain elements. And that's, again, where ERA, again, we have an expert consultant, one that I think the town knows quite well, in fact has retained from time to time on its own. And we think that certainly things would benefit, an understanding would benefit, if those two consultants could actually sit down and meet. For some reason, town staff doesn't want that to happen. We're not sure why. But as I say, as recently as last week, Mr. Simeone reiterated that he doesn't believe that's the appropriate approach.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Flowers, I'm having trouble understanding the nature of your argument here tonight. If I think carefully about what I've heard you say, it sounds to me like you believe that we should be submitting information to you and your client, and I sit here believing that the proper relationship is for you and your client to submit information to us. And we have received quite a lot of information from you and your client. We've received the ERA report. And so my question is, do you have additional relevant information on cultural heritage landscapes that you would like to submit to staff and council?
Not this evening, Mr. Mayor, but just to address that, I believe, frankly, it is actually a two-way street. There was reference to, there was a meeting between town staff and ClubLink and its heritage consultants on March the 30th. Arising from, I wasn't in attendance at that meeting, but I understand from discussions I've had, that arising from that meeting, it was agreed that there would be an exchange of information on both sides. ClubLink then, I believe it was April the 11th, so within just over a week after that meeting, provided the town, as I understand it, with the information that the town requested and that was in our possession. So we provided that, and that's in addition to the ERA report, which again, the town has had since November. So it's not just limited to that, there was additional information. As part of that, my understanding is the town was requested to provide certain information as well. That wasn't received at the time of the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee meeting, and I made that clear to the committee that it was still outstanding. My understanding is that a representative from ClubLink spoke to Mr. Simeone that same day and said, you know, we still don't have this. And then as recently as last week, and this is a letter attached to the letter that I submitted tonight, Mr. Simeone responded and provided some information, but again, not all of it. And just to give one example, there were some questions about views. So in the town's materials, they've identified certain, I think what they refer to as iconic views on Glen Abbey. That's one of the areas, just to use an example, of where ERA wants to get a better understanding of what was the criteria that was used to understand these views and so forth. Instead of answering that, what the town provided was a copy of the same report that we already had about views. So it didn't address that. So to answer your question, I hope that does answer it. We provided additional information, but we're still waiting for information from the town.
I think I've been clear about what I think the relationship is in this public process. We believe that we and the public have to go on information that's made public. There's a record built up through this process, and we welcome any information you want to add to it. We welcome any comment you want to make on any of it, but what you're asking for sounds like you want us to submit to you for approval our information that is not part of the public record, that you want to go behind the screen. You're seeking a special status I'm not familiar with, being a civilian and unschooled in these matters that you're an expert in. So I just would urge you to understand that Council's very clear that it wants to receive all relevant information. If you and ClubLink have additional information for us, please submit it, and we will trust in our staff and our consultants to bring forward the best possible result from the information that you provide.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, but again, and I apologize if I didn't make myself clear, part of the problem that we're having, we have provided a lot of information already. Part of the problem we're having is we're reviewing the very report that is before you tonight. Our own consultants who are experts in this field are having difficulty understanding how the town's consultant, and then ultimately the staff who is recommending this document, arrived at certain findings. We're not asking for special status. We are, after all, though, representing the owner of the property to which this report applies, and we don't understand how some of the findings have been made. We're troubled by some of those things, and we're looking for information to assist in that understanding. I would have thought as members of a municipal council, you would certainly appreciate that. If there's a report in front of you, you want to understand the rationale, you want to understand the findings so that you can make an appropriate decision. If we're able to do that and we have additional information, we'd be happy to provide it to the town.
It's my impression that you reverse our roles, sir, and that we're looking for your information and your questions and your challenges. We're not looking to you know, we're the body that makes the decision. We're looking for the information. So if you have questions, you should bring them to staff. If you have questions, you should bring them to council. But I've never heard of us, I don't think that what you're asking is actually reasonable in the circumstances.
No, with respect, I disagree, Mr. Mayor. You've said if we have questions, we should ask them of staff. We have. We've asked for certain clarification for certain documents. We received some, but not all. So we may have to agree to disagree on the roles that each of us play here. As I say, we believe it is a two-way street. We've received certain information. We've provided certain information. We're looking for some additional information, and that's on the basis upon which we are now asking that council defer consideration of the item until that information has been obtained. And as I've said, if you're not prepared to do that, we've made some further requests in relation to the manner in which you decide to proceed with phase 3. You are the decision maker tonight, and that's why we're putting this forward to assist you in making that decision.
Thank you very much. I hope you heard my invitation to participate fully in phase 3 if that's where the body decides to go, and to bring your information forward.
Well, as I say, we put forward certain requests and recommendations of how we could be involved in phase 3. Again, we want to make sure, and I highlight the word meaningful, we want to make sure that it's not just consultation for the purpose of saying we held a public meeting or we met with or we invited them to a meeting. We want to ensure that it is meaningful consultation, that we have an opportunity to fully understand and the process in terms of the findings, the recommendations that are being made, and then at that point we can offer you our comments on that.
I assure you that it's a point of pride of this council to have only meaningful consultation.
Well, in that case, then, we're in agreement on that. So I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor.
It's wonderful to end on a note of agreement. Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you for your time.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation. We have no more delegations. I'll confine it to table then. Are there other members of the public with new information for council on this matter? Then I'll still confine it to table. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am extremely pleased to move the staff recommendation and they're clearly articulated there, that we move forward to phase 3 with 1333 Dorval Drive. As the commissioner had indicated, we're under some time constraints, what with the interim control bylaw, hence why that is first and foremost on the list to address, but also to address 1086, 2031, and 42436 line. The majority of the focus this evening has been predominantly with the more urgent nature, but you know, as I indicated at the onset of the evening, this is a multifaceted study process, and the fact that there's 3 other properties that have been clearly identified through a similar process as having cultural heritage landscape merit, and that 2 that did not percolate to the top. Definitely money well spent by providing the additional funds to our heritage planning study. Like to thank all the members of the public, the staff, the owners of the various properties, and it was so encouraging to hear this evening that some of the owners of these properties were embracing moving forward in the process and wanting to participate, and were quite, what shall I say, encouraged, having seen the history on their properties. I would just say I've been so pleased with seeing, as many of you may have known, I've served on the Heritage Committee along with Councillor Giddings in the past, Councillor Knoll, others. Our heritage staff have grown in knowledge, expertise. I just can't speak highly enough of how good a job they're doing in protecting our heritage in the town of Oakville. It is so heartwarming. So I'm more than pleased to move the item, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Councillor Elgar.
She mentioned only one property. Is she moving the whole, all 8 items, or just one? Okay. I'd ask for a recorded vote at the appropriate time. Oh, I did see that, but I heard her say I'd be pleased to move. It was 1333 Dorval Road. That's the reason I'm asking, is she moving all 8? And yes, she is. And I'd like a recorded vote, please.
Yes, sir. So, Council, you and I know that this is the start of a procedure. There are no foregone conclusions available from this decision. This is an important event in that it means that we are moving forward to look at what would be the appropriate measures to protect the cultural heritage landscape values that we've seen in these reports. But I would like to caution the public and the media that there is a lot of work yet to be done ahead of us. And this council has been very good about being dedicated to keeping an open mind to the end and open to and considering all evidence brought before it. And that was the reason that I labored so long with Mr. Flowers on the point of if he has additional information beyond what ClubLink has already provided, that they should please provide it. And with that, if you wish to be recorded in favor of Councillor Dudek's motion, please rise to be named. Out of order. We haven't even voted yet. And we don't permit outbursts anyway. We're orderly here in Oakville. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Lischina, and Councillor O'Meara, and Councillor Dudek, and thank you. I did say your name twice, didn't I? I apologize. And Mayor Burton, I don't want to forget to say, I declare the motion unanimously carried, and I thank everyone for their time and their interest and their information to date, and I hope everyone will stay engaged and continue to bring the best that they have to this. So now, I'm going to call a brief recess in case, so that we aren't disrupted by people leaving, if that is in fact, and that is, so we're going to have a little 5-minute recess for the sake of order and bio breaks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm calling the meeting back to order, and we are turning our attention to discussion item number 3, the Economic Development 2016 Annual Report. And if you'll give your attention to Ms. Dorms, she will review for the public and the viewers at home what you've already digested in detail. Ms. Dorms, we're all ears.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. It's a pleasure to present you an update from the Economic Development Department. You all received our 2016 annual report, which has a lot of numbers and facts. And rather than go over that in detail tonight, I just want to highlight a few things for you. So in 2016, we continued to see strong building permit numbers. We saw $153 million in commercial building permits issued, which was well over the 7-year average, and it aligns with our competitive position for attracting office development. Some of the major permits include the new Erin Oaks Kids Center, the 4-story office building at 610 Chartwell Road, which brought M, a WSP company, to Oakville with 300 jobs. On the left of the slide in front of you, you'll see that an image of that office building while it was under construction. Industrial permits were about on average with previous years, with the exception of 2014, where we saw a big spike with the development of the Mid-Halton water treatment plant. The largest permit this year was for the Zeton Advanced Manufacturing Facility on Michigan Drive. Our understanding is that Zeton has purchased a very large property here, and this building is only the first of their plans for this property. The company designs and manufactures pilot plants for customers around the globe, and these pilot plants allow companies to scale up and develop innovative process technologies in industries like oil and gas, biofuels, pharma, and mining. We haven't seen a lot of new industrial construction in Oakville over the past few years, so this is a really exciting investment for Oakville. And you can see the Zeton building on the right side of this slide. Institutional permits were also high. They reached over $107 million in 2016, the largest being for the new Halton Regional Police Services headquarters. And we also saw permits for a new high school and a new elementary school. So in 2016, we continued to see new companies arrive in Oakville, as well as growth in our existing companies, accounting for over 1,000 new jobs in Oakville. The largest announcements for new companies were the new offices for Triple M Group, an engineering consultancy firm, Pusateri's at Oakville Place, and Dave & Buster's, a restaurant and arcade games company located in the Winston Entertainment Complex. But equally exciting to new companies is the growth that we've been seeing in our existing companies. The companies that you see on this list are just an example of a few that expanded in 2016. And when I say expanded, I want to clarify that that might be more employees, but in some cases it's also just larger space, or in some cases it's both. And last month, Mayor Burton announced that Aviva Canada, one of Canada's leading insurance providers, will be moving into a new office in Oakville, bringing approximately 800 jobs to our community. Their new building will be constructed by First Gulf on the former Xerox plant along the North Service Road. In 2016, the Economic Development Department developed several new marketing tools that will help our investment attraction initiatives. The first I want to highlight is our new Invest Oakville website. When we completed our international business plan in 2015, they recommended that we create a standalone website to highlight Oakville as a place for investment. We applied for and received funding to develop this website through the federal government's Invest Canada Community Initiatives, or ICCI, funding program. The new website provides a considerable amount of information on our value proposition, our largest companies, key industries, and it also features a data center with stats, including demographic, labor force, development activity, and business costs. Since launching this website, we've received very positive feedback, and we're going to be working in 2017 to drive more traffic to the site. We've had over 5,200 hits to the website in Q1, which is an increase of over 30% from our old space on the oakville.ca website. And we didn't actually launch the site until the end of January, so we're seeing really positive growth there. We also launched social media accounts in 2016, and we're developing a plan to grow our followers and improve content and engagement for 2017. If you haven't already, I encourage you to check out the website and to follow us on Twitter at Invest Oakville. We also look to improve some of our existing tools, such as our Find Oakville tool, which is a searchable listing of industrial and commercial properties available for sale or lease. We've added a considerable amount of data and functionality to this tool, allowing users to do things like look up transit stops close to a potential location to understand how their staff might get to work. We've added traffic counts data, including mid-block and intersection data, so businesses can understand who's going by their business on a daily basis. We've also incorporated Halton Region's employment survey data, so users can look up businesses by sector to understand where those sectors are located in Oakville, as well as explore companies located within a particular geographic area. We've also incorporated Environics analytics into the tool, and a user can create a customized demographic or business report based on a radius around a property of interest. You can see an example of a demographic report there on the right side of your screen. So we think that this tool will provide access to the business intelligence data that new companies and existing companies are looking for. It also helps staff with requests. When we get requests, we need to be able to turn them around quickly, and a tool like this helps us achieve those goals. So in 2016, staff worked with numerous groups to leverage various economic development initiatives. For the auto mayors, this included working with industry reps, the Automotive Policy Research Center at McMaster, and economic development offices across the province. Partnership discussions have been held with Sheridan College, Silicon Halton, and Haltech to explore opportunities for innovation projects at the former post office site. Internationally, Oakville has established relationships with the cities of Huai'an and Fujian District in Shenzhen, today signing an MOU to foster friendship and business development. We've also worked closely with the Oakville Chinese Business Association to help with two-way investment. And lastly, we continue to partner with the Oakville Milton District Real Estate Board to obtain an automatic feed of properties for sale or lease that populate our Find Oakville site. These partnerships have helped to strengthen our ability to service the Oakville business community. We also wanted to highlight to Council some of the work that we have planned for 2017 and into 2018. In 2017, our department will be working to develop the downtown mitigation plan for the Lakeshore Road Streetscape project in conjunction with the BIA and various town departments. We will continue to explore the interim use of the post office in downtown. A report on the post office will be coming to Administrative Services Committee in June. We will be developing our investment attraction activities, including building relationships with the new Toronto Global, which is now up and running, as well as with our provincial and federal counterparts. We will continue on our efforts on doing business with China, as we recently held a successful Doing Business in Oakville for Chinese Newcomers event in partnership with the Oakville Chinese Business Association. That event was attended by over 100 residents. And today we hosted a delegation from Futian District in Shenzhen, in which Mayor Burton signed an MOU to encourage friendship and business development opportunities between our communities. We are developing a marketing strategy to increase awareness of Oakville as a location for investment, utilizing our new marketing tools like the Invest Oakville website and social media. We're working on the Brownfield Strategy and Community Improvement Plan. We applied and received funding from FCM in 2016 to undertake the strategy and CIP development. We've recently completed the stakeholder research, and we plan to bring a report to Council in the fall. Staff will also be working with other departments to develop a one-window approach for filming requests. Since our first strategy was developed in 2009, we've seen a number of successes and growth in our identified target sectors. There's been significant investments with new companies coming to Oakville, including Siemens, PwC, and Canadian Tire Financial Services. As well, there's been considerable investment in new plant and equipment from long-standing companies like Ford Canada. These continued investments speak to the positive business environment and livability of the Oakville community. The economic development strategy was a 10-year plan, and we're approaching the end of that period. In 2017, we will apply for federal funding through the ICCI program to undertake the development of a new economic development strategy in 2018. So in closing, 2016 was another exciting year for Oakville. We saw continued industrial and commercial growth, we welcomed new companies, and we expanded our tools for marketing Oakville as a place for investment. As we move forward in 2017, we focus on supporting and building the business environment in Oakville that makes us so attractive to new companies and makes our existing companies want to stay and grow here in Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your success with your objectives. Council and the town appreciate and benefit from it. Councillor Hutchins?
Yes, thank you very much. It was very impressive. The business environment down south has considerably changed since much of this was put together. I take it that the new developments in 2017 will take that into consideration when the Buy American and American jobs for Americans, that sort of thing. There are a lot of, Ford being one of them, big companies around that we don't want to lose.
Through you, Mayor Burton. I think for sure we'll be doing a full scope of this strategy. We've seen a lot of success, and we've also seen a lot of change over the past 10 years, and we need to be taking a fulsome look, and that will include looking at what's happening with our neighbors.
Councillor Lischina?
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Storms, I also enjoyed reading this report. It was quite exciting. I'm wondering, though, about the brownfield redevelopment strategy. You indicated that it's coming later in the fall, but at this point, are you able to let us know about how many locations in Oakville we're looking at, or percentage of land, or any information regarding that?
Through you, Mayor Burton. As part of that strategy, we aren't taking an official, we're not developing an official inventory, so I don't have a specific number. That was outside of the scope of the budget we were working with. We do have an estimate, and I don't know it off the top of my head, so I can certainly provide that to you. But we haven't gone ahead with developing an inventory, so I don't have a specific number.
Thank you, Councillor Lischina. Commissioner, do you have any additional information on that? My information is we don't have many.
We don't know about all the sites. They're in private ownership as well. But the ones that we do know about are fairly limited in terms of land area throughout the town.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the information on the brownfield strategy as well. I'm glad to see that we're moving forward with the one-window approach for filmmakers, having been involved with that last year. I think a lot of good things will come out of that. And the Lakeshore Road Streetscape Project. Councillor Hutchins and the Mayor and Commissioner Closey have been doing the rounds with community residents associations, and every meeting we have, they talk about downtown, and when we explain to them part of the mitigation strategy that it's being worked on now, it brings a great sense of relief to our residents, and I know to Councillor Hutchins and myself, so thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's worth recognizing and thanking the director, Ms. St. George, for the time that she has invested to attending the meetings of the Downtown BIA and bringing her expertise to bear on their challenges. And so I thank you, and I want you to know they appreciate it very much. You add a lot of value to the meetings you attend. Thank you. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Knoll, Councillor Hutchins? It's moved by Councillor Knoll. All in favor? And that is carried. That brings us to the Heritage Grant Program for 2017. And you have the report. Diane Childs is here to answer questions or also to do a little introduction. Let's have a little introduction here.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to introduce Kristen Flood, who started with us at the beginning of March of this year as a heritage planner. She came with us from the city of St. John, New Brunswick.
Oh my goodness. Welcome to what we laughingly call Upper Canada.
Oh, thank you very much, Your Worship. So tonight I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Heritage Grant Program from 2017. So this is the fourth year of the Heritage Grant Program, and $90,000 are available in funding each year for eligible projects. This year we received 25 applications requesting over $181,000 in funding. So once again, the program has been oversubscribed. So after receiving the applications, a small working group comes together that consists of 3 Heritage Oakville committee members and 2 staff members. And together we identify high and low priority projects. And the approach we took was to spread the grant money over as many of the applications as we could, with the higher priority projects receiving a higher percentage of their funding requests. The next step is to provide a minimum scope of work to the property owners so that they have clarity on what is required of them going forward. Of the 25 applications we received, we are recommending that 22 of them receive some level of funding. The 3 applications that we're not recommending be funded are ineligible projects and hard landscaping projects. So the 2017 projects include restoration work of a structural nature, so that's structural walls, roofs, and foundations, and also restoration of existing heritage attributes that are integral to the preservation of the superstructure of the heritage building. So that includes restoration of historic windows and doors, new replacement wood storm windows and doors, wood shutters, and significant repairs to historic stucco and masonry. Here are some photos of a few of the properties that we received applications for. So the Heritage Oakville Committee recommends that Council, in accordance with the staff recommendation, that Council approve the 2017 funding grant projects in maximum approved allotment as attached in Appendix A, recommended amounts to the report titled Heritage Grant Program 2017, dated April 10th, 2017.
Thank you. There's a question from Councillor Hutchins.
Thank you very much. Being on the Heritage Committee, I'm an enthusiastic supporter for such things, particularly when you consider for the last 3 years, the town provided $240,000 in heritage grants, and that generated $1 million and over $1 million worth of development and heritage renewal throughout the town. So I would like to move this when the time comes, please.
We may be there. Are there other questions? There's a motion on the floor from Councillor Hutchins. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed if any? And Councillor Hutchins, your motion is approved. And now we have a notice of intention to demolish at 416 and 418 Reynolds Street. And the report from the Planning Services Department is that the property be removed from the Oakville Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. That's the holding list where properties go before we decide whether they are of heritage value. I say that not for your benefit, Council, because I know you know it well, but for the benefit of the public. There is a presentation available on this from Ms. Flood, and in the interests of giving her as much practice appearing before us, I would suggest that we entertain her presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have received a notice of intention to demolish from the owners of 416, 418 Reynolds Street. The property is currently listed on the Heritage Register, so we have received the notice of intention to demolish. However, the owners do not wish to demolish the entire structure. Rather, they intend to demolish the street-facing facade to allow for the construction of an addition. The property contains a residence built circa 1915 and a secondary residence located to the rear of the main residence, and that was constructed at a later date. So following the receipt of that submission, staff conducted historical research to determine whether or not the property merits designation under Ontario Regulation 906. The staff research report determined that the subject house is a representative but altered example of a mid-1910s two-story brick Edwardian home, that the house does not have any significant associations, and that the property generally supports the character of the surrounding area, but that it does not define it in any significant way, and that it is not a landscape, or a landmark, sorry. So in conclusion, the property is not considered to have sufficient heritage merit, or value, to merit designation as an individual property, and staff are recommending that it be removed from the register. So both staff and the Heritage Oakville Committee recommend that the property at 416, 418 Reynolds Street be removed from the Oakville Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gittings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the report fully. Just out of curiosity, the homeowners have said that they intend to remove the facade, the porches on the front. If this goes through, though, they could well remove the property, correct? Demolish the entire property. It's not a demolition for the porches.
Yes. Through you, Your Worship, that's correct. They would have the ability to submit a demolition permit application following the removal of the property without any heritage review required.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
I'm looking at the picture. So there's two homes. So if the one is demolished, that doesn't impact the other one behind it in any way. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, if the property is removed from the register, both buildings could be demolished. At this time, the owners are not proposing to demolish that rear structure. They intend to keep it on the site.
So I'm clear. There's two separate residents in these two homes. Thank you.
That's correct.
Any other questions? A motion, perhaps? Councillor O'Meara moves the staff recommendation.
I would, Your Worship, and I would just note to my council colleagues to make sure your form is fine, as we are in the presence of our Canadian Olympian Lee Parkhill, who's got interest in this as a sailor. So I'm happy to move that, and thank Lee for coming to council as well.
So this is an Olympic event.
I'm sure for him tonight it feels like it.
Well then, it's moved by Councillor O'Meara. Let's see if it passes. All those in favor? Any opposed? It does carry. Congratulations, if that's what you wanted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Council, I ask your attention now to item number 6. And this is a study to recommend appropriate zoning regulations for rooftop terraces and balconies. And as you'll recall, we've had a couple of instances where we've recognized that we need to address this issue. And so we're going to turn now to Gabe Charles. And Gabe is going to introduce another addition to our staff. And then she gets to present the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are lots of practice going on tonight. I did want to introduce Yana Kelman from our planning department. She is an urban designer who's been with us for over 5 years now, and Yana has been taking the lead on this particular study, and so she will be presenting that for you this evening.
Ms. Kellerman, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. Thank you. The purpose of this report is to introduce a study to recommend appropriate zoning regulations for rooftop terraces and balconies. The Town Zoning Bylaw 2014 includes prohibitions of balconies and uncovered platforms in residential -0 zones. In April 2016, the Ontario Municipal Board approved amendments to zoning bylaw which introduced regulations for rooftop terraces, and these regulations deal with uses in which these terraces are permitted and also setbacks and design of these terraces. Throughout the processing of development applications, staff experienced several situations in which the above mentioned existing regulations appear to be very problematic, and I will speak about these in a moment. And we believe that this study will help staff evaluate if the existing regulations are effective and if some revisions to the existing regulations may provide for both more functional as well as more inclusive design. I'll speak about the balconies first. The prohibition of balconies on such a large scale doesn't contemplate instances in which these balconies would not negatively impact privacy of the surrounding neighbors, such as large lots abutting the lake or ravines or parks and woodlots. Further, the prohibition is only applicable in the -0 suffix zones. As you can see on this illustration, the areas in blue are the -0 suffix zones, but in many instances they're abutting other low-density residential zones in which balconies are permitted, and this creates a very unbalanced situation. Since the passing of 2014 bylaw, we had 32 applications for minor variances to permit balconies in -0 zones. And due to the prohibition of balconies, a request for minor variances cannot be supported by staff. Through the study, staff will review other options which would still protect the privacy of surrounding properties and also create a more balanced approach. Rooftop terraces provide opportunities for great outdoor amenity spaces in urban areas, and when designed well, they can increase the tree canopy coverage and reduce stormwater runoff. As the definition for the rooftop terraces recognizes any terraces over the roof structure, such as garages or podiums of the buildings, as rooftop terraces, the regulations have a considerable impact on the viability of a building's design. The zoning regulations regarding rooftop terraces may prohibit or significantly restrict terraces in locations which may be desirable. So at this time, staff is analyzing and concluding detailed research, collecting information, and examining the recent regulations. In June of 2017, we would like to provide a public consultation opportunity, and based on the comments received, we will prepare the final recommendation for a zoning bylaw amendment. A statutory public meeting is anticipated in early fall of 2017 with a recommendation report to follow. And we recommend that this report is received. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you very much. Will staff be looking at rooftop terraces for patios in the business areas, the BIA areas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would like to do that. We would like to look at all of the possible options and analyze what it would do and in which areas and in which neighborhoods this would be possible option and where it would not be a good solution.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor, will you move receipt of the information?
Happy to.
Any other questions? Councillor Liz Chin?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. So the impetus for this was the change from the Ontario Municipal Board allowing rooftop terraces where we didn't before. So is that my understanding? Is that?
Well, our zoning before didn't have rooftop terraces included, and it was appealed. So it was through the Ontario Municipal Board that the regulations, but they came from us. It was just.
So then, as part of your review, will you be looking at other municipalities with respect to what they are doing, or at least in our area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are researching the other municipalities and their bylaws.
Great, thank you.
Any others? It's moved by Councillor O'Meara. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and the item is received. And that brings us now to item number 7, the OMB appeal on 309 Church Street. And the recommendation is for council to make a determination whether to confirm the appeal already lodged or to withdraw it. Councillor Giddings.
If my council colleagues don't have any questions, I'd be happy to move the first or confirmed recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. I agree with that recommendation. I'll support that. Are there other comments? Shall I put the question? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Could we turn our attention now to the next of, this is like a series tonight. We have the number 8, the Wycroft Road matter, and I'm recognizing Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move the second that the appeal be withdrawn. We had a similar situation in another area in Oakville where we were of differing opinion, shall we say, of staff. And I wholeheartedly support this. It's a property that was sitting derelict abutting the QEW, and the owner of the property wants to have a rooftop amenity, and I don't think people on the QEW would have a problem with privacy overlook.
Thank you, Councillor. I also support your motion on this matter. Are there other comments? Shall I put the vote? Councillor Hutchins?
Yes, I'd just like to ask their opinion on the fact, sorry, I'd like to ask staff an opinion on the fact that there is only 0.618 meters separation when we apparently generally call for 2 as a minimum.
Through your worship, as I understand the question, you're asking me as planning director what our views are with respect to the reduced setback of providing 0.618 of a meter, where 2.0 meters are required. I believe in the context of this application, this would be considered a minor variance.
It's duly moved. Shall I put the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any. Councillor Duddick, your motion carries in its entirety. Now, on C1 and C2, the confidential discussion items, I am told that for C1, the applicant has advised the OMB he no longer wishes to appeal the decision So only clauses 1 and 2 are to be approved if that suits you, council. And if it does, may I have a motion to that effect? Councilor O'Meara, thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. On C2, we have available a presentation from our one of our solicitors, Mr. Perlin, the distinguished Mr. Perlin, who's sat up here all night for you. And I believe that this recommendation can be made public, and I'm looking for a mover of thank you, Councilor O'Meara. I'll put the question, all in favor? And that's carried, and now I'll make public the decision that the appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board of the Committee of Adjustment decision at 17 Mississauga Street be confirmed, and that the action of the town solicitor or his designate in executing the consent by the owners and applicants and by the appellants to the allowing of the appeal and the dismissal of the OMB by the OMB of application CAVA 061212017 in its entirety also be confirmed. So that's for the record, for the public. That brings us now to our advisory committee minutes for Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee's meeting on April 25th. Councillor Chisholm. We just did it. Councillor O'Meara moved it. I read out the withdrawal. She's done. Would you like to do her again? Are we satisfied with the minutes of Heritage Oakville? If we are, Councillor Hutchins? Councillor Hutchins is moving the minutes as listed in the agenda. All those in favor? And that is carried. A motion to rise and report to council would be in order. Councillor Lapworth, thank you. All in favor? And that carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on discussion items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, confidential discussion items C1 and C2, and advisory committee minutes, item 9, as noted by the clerk. Could we have a mover and seconder for this report? Councillor Lischina, Councillor Knoll, all those in favor? Opposed, if any. The report is adopted. Council, is there new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature? Madam Clerk, I see none. Are there a mover and seconder for the consideration and reading of the bylaws? Councillor Hutchins and Councillor Chisholm. All those in favor? And the bylaws are hereby adopted. That completes the agenda for this evening. Thank you for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and that is the end of the meeting.